as I said, I can't think of a better week for me to launch this new podcast, and I certainly can't think of a better person to have on the first episode than my main man Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports. Charles and I go way back. Um, I'm talking like early 2000s press boxes. When you were in Orlando at the time, I was at the Boston
We're the
Globe,
old, we're the old heads.
cover
We're officially.
covering the NFL, hanging out at the combine, hanging out at the Senior Bowl. Grew up in this game together, and I've said this to him privately, and so I'm not embarrassing him publicly. There's nobody better when it comes to covering the National Football League. There's nobody more connected, nobody more respected. And so and I feel great having you on today because of our relationship, but also, dude, it's like nobody's been more on top of these Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay, New York negotiations than you have. And you've kept me up to speed on everything, and everybody, all your readers and followers, up to speed on everything, every step of the way. So with that said, Chuck, how did it finally go down?
It was interesting. So, these they went on for a long time. Like these, and first off, let me say thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited about this. Like you said, we've been together for the longest. I know you have my man Josh Norris on today. Um, Everything about this show has me so excited, man.
Thanks,
I'm,
man.
I'm glad I'm glad to get with you. I'm glad to get with you today. Thank God this is finally over with Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers. This negotiation was crazy. I mean, it was you go back really a week before he went on Pat McAfee show and talked about his intention to play for the Jets. Um, it stretches back all the way to then. And you had exchanges early on that if you looked at it now, you'd be like, damn, I'm surprised they even got to a deal. Okay.
Mm.
Because early on in the beginning, I think the Packers are sitting there looking at the Matt Stafford deal and saying, well, that's kind of the deal we want. We want a deal like that. We want a couple firsts. We just want this bounty for Aaron Rodgers. And the Jets were like, no, we're not even, we're not starting there. Like, that is a crazy starting spot for a guy who's, going to be 39. He's going to play
Yeah.
in 2023 at 39. So even from the outset, if you had listened into the calls at the beginning, you would have thought they're not getting this done. There's just no way.
Mm.
It's insane because I think when the Jets came out of the gate, what they offered was insane. It was just like both sides were trying to absolutely obliterate the other one at the table, and
Is it like
went
one
through
of
the
those fantasy trade offers that you're like,
yes,
wait, are you
yeah,
just like
yes,
you just hoping I make a mistake and press accept? Is that what this
absolutely,
is?
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
insulting.
It's
Oh,
it's the
okay.
it was the offer where you're like, what like the first like your first
Wait,
reaction like
do you not know that I follow football? Like,
right
what do you think this
right
is?
like if I was like I mean the Packers I would have and I saw the Jets first offer and I'm not going to get into exactly what it was. I mean it was bad enough that I don't even want to say precisely what it was, but the Packers probably first inclination when they saw the Jets offer was like he's not dead, right? Like you're not acquiring him to
Give me
bury
okay.
him.
Listen,
Like,
it's just me and you, Chuck. Ain't nobody listening. It's just me and you. We family. We're in
yeah,
the trust
yeah.
tree. We're in the nest. Just at least give me an idea. You can't tease me
It
like that
was
and say it was bad. What was it? What
okay.
was around what it was?
It was well outside of 2 second rounders, which is and so basically the deal that we got, the meat of this deal now is the Packers getting the second rounder from the Jets in this year's draft. They're getting a second rounder next year that's going to graduate into a first
Mm-hmm.
rounder when he plays 65% of his snaps, right? And then there's a bunch of
Right.
little accoutrement like attached,
Right.
the pick
Pick
swap this year, the
swap, that sort of
13th.
thing. Yeah. Fifth
Yeah,
and
right,
sixth.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm just telling you, the beginning, you had, like I said, you had the Packers coming out and saying, we want something like the Matt Stafford deal, which is going to be
Yeah.
like a couple firsts. We want a lot.
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
had the Packers coming out and going, we're not even
The
giving
Jets.
you two twos. Or, I mean,
Oh,
yeah, then
okay.
you had the Jets coming out and saying, we're not even giving you two twos on this. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to start in like the two threes neighborhood kind of situation, like
Oh,
it
wow.
again,
Okay.
it was two sides that were just way,
Right.
way far apart. And
It's like in the movie Draft Day. At least act like you called me. So the Jets were
right,
approaching like the Packers were trying to
right.
give him away. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was again the I didn't hear about how it began until way later from each side, and had I heard it at the beginning, I flat out would have just said, I probably would have come on your show and I would have been like, yeah, it's never going to happen. Like it's atrocious how far apart they are. So that's where you begin, right? Which is not uncommon in NFL trades. Each side's trying to mollywop the other. And then, things continue, you move on, things get said publicly. Aaron Rodgers goes out and says what he says. I think when they got to the point before he went on the Pat McAfee show, and I've said this before, I'm very confident at that time that there was a third and a first that was going to be on the table from the Jets side. Okay. And they had worked really hard to really ultimately get to that point. And then the Pat McAfee show, Rodgers goes out and says this thing about I was 90% retired. And that threw a wrench in this whole thing, especially from the perspective of owner Woody Johnson. Like he was like, man, I don't like what, wait a minute. This is the first time we're hearing he thought he was 90% retired. And by the way, the Jets weren't alone. When I talked to the Packers, they were like, that was the first time we heard that. Like we never heard him say that until he said it. So both sides were hearing this piece of information. It was new. And so, it kind of threw a wrench into talks because, you have Woody Johnson. He's sitting there going, wait a minute. Let's hit the brakes on this. Are we getting this guy for 2 years? Like, because it feels like we might not get him for 2 years. It just complicated things in the middle. I think it elongated the whole process. And it put the Jets into a position where, because of how the owner felt, you want to play some defense here and make sure there's some element of protection when it comes to feeling, at least from Rodgers, he's going to play 2 years, and then protecting that 2024 draft asset in some way, shape, or form. I think it ultimately, let's say like the last, they really started talking about a week before the deal got done. They started talking again. Before that, though, there was just a dead period, and it was basically the Packers
that's when I was telling you to go ahead and mediate this.
Yeah. That was straight up. That was the Packers saying, here's where we're at. We got to have your first round pick in 2024 straight up. The Jets this was like really the hanging point they had gotten to. They had talked about, a give back protection and all this other stuff, but it really boiled down to the wall was, we need your 2024 first straight up. The Jets were like, we ain't doing that. And the Packers were like, ball's in your court. And the Jets are like, all right, we just ain't calling you back. And that was it. And it literally sat dead because the Jets were like, we're just not calling them back. We're not going to call these guys back because we're not giving up a straight first. It's a non-starter. It's not going to happen. And so that dead silence, both sides, it was funny because when you talk to both sides, everybody believed the same thing. This is really going to start to pick up again when it's a week before the draft. Because the Packers knew they wanted a draft asset this year. They wanted one of those seconds this year to work with.
And the pick swap,
and the pick swap. Although the pick swap, again, that was something that had been discussed in different iterations of the deal. All kinds of different things had been discussed up until this point. And the Jets are like, right. The Jets are sitting there staring at the Packers and going, we know they want an asset this year. We know we're going to re-engage on this thing. So they ended up re-engaging late last week. And basically it was like, look, in principle, we're really close. What are the little extras we can start to kind of work and massage into this deal in terms of protections, in terms of assets, that'll just get this done? Let's get it done. And the pick swap became part of that. That was part of what really helped push this through, was the Packers being able to get to 13, the Jets being able to get to 15. And here's a little thing I'll tell you here. As far as the Jets are concerned, and maybe this will make Jets fans feel a little bit better, if you looked at the Jets draft board, the way their grades stack up this year, and it's like this for a lot of teams, the shelf, you've got, I'm not saying specifically the Jets, but the shelf is somewhere inside the top, 2 or 3. Then it goes out to the next, 6 or 7 players. Then there's this huge swath of players that are all graded similarly. In other words, picking at 13 versus 15 is not going to be a difference for the Jets. Okay.
Right.
Well, they didn't feel like it was a huge.
But if it makes you feel better, sure.
But
here you go.
Right. Right. If it makes you feel better, fine. We'll do the pick swap. And in the Jets' mind, and I know Jets fans are pissed off about this, they're sitting there going, all he's got to do is play 65% of
that's
the
a low threshold. I was about to say, isn't that effective? They say we're not giving you a straight first. It's got to be a disaster for him not to play 65%, right?
Yes, but that's exactly the point, Mike, is that the Jets are sitting there going, for him to play 65% of the snaps and us not to be in great shape, something like multiple other things must have happened on our team. Like we think if Aaron Rodgers plays 65% of snaps for us, he's likely playing 100% of the snaps for us, especially when you look
Right.
at
And
his
that's a
career.
late first round pick now.
And
Yeah.
we're going to be doing well. Right, we're going to be
Yeah.
doing well. And
Yeah.
so Jets fans just got to get over in their mind that for the Jets, they look at this as being a change. When they looked at the season, they're like, look, October 23rd, we beat the Broncos. We start 5-2, but we lose Brees Hall. We
Mm-hmm.
lose Elijah Vera Tucker. Okay. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
everything changes for us. If you look the next week, look at how many passes Zach Wilson throws. It's like in the 40s. Like I think he threw like 41 or so. It was crazy. And you could tell they saw the shift. They're like, if we had the right quarterback in the spot, somebody who was seasoned and could handle this, we could have
Mm-hmm.
weathered that and potentially still made a playoff push. So they thought there's two ways we're looking at this. We just get the quarterback in here for the next 2 years who now has a massive chip on his shoulder. Okay. Aaron Rodgers is pissed. Okay. He is not happy about any of this went down. He absolutely feels like he's got something to prove, which I think the Jets love. They're like, hey, that's value we're getting here, right? Um,
Wait, can I
and
interject here?
then
Because I don't want I don't
yeah,
want you to go
absolutely,
too far past that.
right,
Don't lose your
yeah,
track. But I
let's
want
do
to.
it.
So, is this just like a type A athlete manufacturing a boogeyman? And I took that personally because it
No,
feels like for
mm-mm.
Rodgers, this is the best thing for him too. Both teams got what they wanted, but Rodgers should have wanted this as well. No, given the state of the rosters.
Yeah, I think yes, and I don't want to speak too much to his mindset. I don't talk to Aaron Rodgers directly. Okay, so and his circle is smaller now than it's ever been before. Now that said, I feel like I am pretty confident. I
Yeah,
understand where he's approaching this from,
yeah.
and um, I think for Rodgers, look, there's an element of he did overall his career in Green Bay. He enjoyed it there. He had a lot of success in Green Bay. There's a ton of memories. He had friends there. Um, I get it. I understand why maybe you want to retire because you're like, okay, do I really want to go somewhere else and start anew? Which even look, I know he's 39, but still whole new franchise. There are some people there he's familiar with, Nathaniel Hackett and whatnot. Alan
Mm-hmm.
Lazard, but still, it's a big deal to just suddenly
Yeah,
change at the
yeah.
end of your career like that versus just retiring and okay, I'm good. I had a good career. I'm happy. But I do think it's real that over the years, the last several years, I think he has not been comfortable with that front office for a long time. I think he is not like the way that they have interacted for a really long time. And I think like he has felt like contract aside, and most people won't accept this, but contract aside, there is an element of respect that you have in a working relationship. You can get paid a lot of money, but not, still feel like people basically are looking at you like we pay you a lot of money, shut up. Like
Hey,
we don't, yeah. Yeah,
preach.
yeah, right.
I
we
feel
gonna.
you.
I mean, if you want to go down that road, we could go down that
Yeah,
road.
I feel you. I feel you.
So, he was just like, look, there's more than just the money aspect of it. There is a respect aspect of it. It
Mhm.
bothered him for a really long time the way he felt like that organization treated players. I think if you go back to when they let go of Jordy Nelson, that's when it all started for Aaron Rodgers. He felt like they let
Yeah.
go of Jordy Nelson without having a conversation with Aaron, and that was the first time he was like, "Whoa, like what? Like wait a minute, this is how we're gonna do business now? Like you're not even gonna talk to me? Like this is one of my guys, one of my trusted players, and you're not even gonna talk to me. You just made it about dollars and cents, and it was cold and calculated, and that was it. I think that's where all this started, and then it snowballed from there. But anyway, aside from that, it is real. I think he does
Mhm.
feel like I still have a lot to offer. I think he's
Yeah, you were
pissed
saying
off.
the Jets, they're getting a guy with a. Oh, you were going through the Jets. The benefits for them. They're getting a guy with a chip on his shoulder. That's what you were
Yeah,
saying before I cut you off.
yeah, no, and so I think for them, they're sitting there saying we absolutely have someone who feels like he's got something to prove here. Who they feel like when he walks into our building, there's going to be a certain element where the change invigorates you, where
Mm-hmm.
it's the mystery of what now you're going through is a little exciting because it's new people, new places, a new level of
Yeah.
respect. He has a really good thing going, I think, with the front office with the Jets, because that was a lot of, those meetings. I think he felt like, hey, I kind of vibe with Joe Douglas and these guys, which is going to be a big change for him. Um, and then I think for the Jets, it's really a two-pronged play. And I know people are
I
not going to
love
want to
this.
hear this.
No,
Yeah,
I loved
this
it.
is
I read you right up this morning. Win now and
yeah,
grow now. I like that.
that's exactly right. I think the Jets, I don't know the Jets would ever admit this publicly, but I think if you were in that building, I know if you were in that building and you were having candid conversations with some people there, they would tell you, in hindsight, we probably should have given Zach Wilson a redshirt year. We should have not started Zach his freshman year. We should have not started Zach his rookie year, and we should have build out the team, made sure, like, look, just let's get him comfortable with what the offense is. Let's get him comfortable where he is at, confidence wise, everything. Build out as much of the roster as we can, and then year two, we'll slide Zach into the starting spot, but give him that year for an adjustment period because of a multitude of different factors. Some of which was how things were run at BYU. I mean, look, it's not a one for one often between a lot of college programs in the NFL. So plus,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, the spotlight of New York plays into
Mm-hmm.
this. It's a different place there. People got to understand that it's different. If you're a New York rookie, whether it's with the Giants or the Jets, I would say even more so the Jets. The intensity of that spotlight, the criticism, the microscope, it is so different there than most anywhere in the NFL that you
Yeah.
play. That is real. And if you're a quarterback, I would just challenge you, go talk to every single former New York Jets rookie quarterback who started in year 1, 2, or 3 or whatever, and they will
I
tell
know
you
he's
the
damn
story.
near 40. I know he's damn near 40, and we'll get back to Wilson in a second. But sidebar, is Rodgers really ready for it? Given, I mean, he's been a national figure, but he has been in Green Bay.
Yeah,
I mean, is that what that seems like an interesting conflict waiting to happen? The New York market with Rodgers.
it's different. I don't know that he even knows. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think for Rodgers, the way Rodgers looks at it is, I've been in lightning rod already. And I've
Right.
been, We go through
What
all
you
the
gonna say about
COVID
me ain't already
stuff.
said? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. He's like,
Yeah.
come on, man. Like, I've been, like, let's be honest, I've been a topic of conversation from Green Bay, of all places. I've been a national
Right.
topic of
Nationally.
conversation
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
years. Right.
Yeah.
And so to him, he's like, really, how much different could this be? I agree with that. However, um, I think the intensity of struggling in Green Bay, knowing the resume he had had and some of the capital he had banked, versus the intensity of anything going wrong in New York. He has not earned any capital. All people process it through, particularly the fan bases. Oh, we just gave up capital to get this
Yeah.
guy. Um, is going to be a different kind of scrutiny. But I do think he is one of the few quarterbacks, if they were changing teams, that I believe is up to that kind of a challenge. I think Brady's a guy who would have been up to that kind of challenge. I think Rodgers is. I think Peyton Manning's the kind of guy, like when he went to
Mm-hmm.
Denver, he was going to be up
Mm-hmm.
to that kind of challenge. He's on that level mentally.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you're right. It's going to be
It's
it's
gonna
going
be
to be a
different day
movie.
to day.
It's going to be a
It's gonna be
movie.
different day
There's
to
no
day.
doubt.
But back to
Yeah.
Zach Wilson though, you were talking about that, hindsight, just BYU to New York, rookie quarterback in New
Yeah.
York, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think the Jets would have sat him year one if they could have. That didn't happen, obviously, right? Everything went wrong. Wheels fell off. I don't think the kid was ready for the scrutiny of the backlash that was going to happen outside of the locker room, and then not somewhat, then inside the locker room, guys start to look at you like, are you the guy? And there's questions, and it's just different. And
Yeah.
so, but I think the Jets are sitting there and they're saying, look, I don't think I know this. The Jets are sitting there, they're going, look, the kid still has the tools. Okay.
Hmm.
It isn't, the things we liked about him have not changed since he's come out of BYU. Now his confidence took an asteroid strike. Okay. Like, he took a massive hit here. What would it look like if he was able to step back for 2 years, reboot mentally, have
Hmm.
time to basically work on whatever he needs to work on. And not only that, be someone who can be in the room with Aaron Rodgers and watch how Aaron Rodgers works, watch how he communicates, watch how the expectations he brings to the table, how he prepares. come to understand how he influences and shapes the offense. They think that's nothing but a net positive. And, look, let's be honest, Zach Wilson is not cheap. He carries a salary commensurate to being the number 2 pick in the draft, which is going to go
Mm-hmm.
from he's going to make I think like 9 million, somewhere around like 9 million year 2, 10 million, 11 million year 3, or I mean, 9 million year 3,
Mm-hmm.
10, 11 million year 4. And
Mm-hmm.
then year 5, you would have to kick in his fifth
His
year
option.
option. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you want to keep him. And then but I think the Jets are sitting there going, look, we got the short-term play, which we think we could potentially be a Super Bowl team, the Aaron Rodgers, and then we have the long-term back-end play where if we can resurrect Zach Wilson, if we can build him back up and get him where we think, again, it'll be the right time for him to roll back out there, this is going to be a massive win for our franchise. Like, this is going to be like a turning point win for our franchise,
Mm-hmm.
both in the short term and long term. And I
Right.
will say one thing about this. If Jets fans understood Rodgers' career in Green Bay, if you went back and really looked at the beginning, it did not go well for him early on behind Brett Favre.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Right.
and from an injury standpoint, from just the play standpoint, early on with Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre, there were questions about like, I don't know, this looks like a mistake. Like, this looks like this is a guy that is not going to live up to being even this first round gamble.
Right.
But it as he got his feet under him, as Aaron Rodgers, I think there was a physical change that occurred with him. He became a stronger player. Um, there were just a lot of things about being a professional quarterback in the NFL that he learned the first couple of years behind Favre. And then when he stepped in, he was ready. He was ready then. But I don't think he was
Yeah.
ready until he actually stepped in. A year earlier would have been too soon. 2 years
Yeah.
earlier would have been way too soon. So
Yeah.
it's I understand it. I get it. And it might not work out with Zach, but I think, look, the play is a
Smart.
smart play.
It's very smart. No, I was told a long time ago, QB development isn't linear.
No.
And what's fascinating about this, and that's why I loved your write up about it, because you couldn't. I was at it's a Thursday night game. I was at Jaguars at Jets. Jaguars going on their run to make the playoffs. Jets are trying to hold on to making the playoffs. Mike White is hurt. Zach Wilson's playing, and they benched him for what is it? Streeter was 15? Was it?
Yeah, the
They
kid with
benched him during that game.
the sleeve, the arm sleeve. That's how I
Yeah,
remember. I'm like, who's the big QB
yeah.
with the arm
But they
sleeve?
but they benched Zach Wilson's getting booed. It was a mercy benching. They put him in. The offense actually starts moving the ball. And the perception, and all that week, that's when Robert Saleh had made his instant coffee comparison. All that week, they tried to defend Zach Wilson. You couldn't tell anybody that Zach Wilson had a future in New York. But what this tells me, what you're saying, is that A, they believe he can play,
Yeah.
and that he can actually be a functioning NFL quarterback despite looking like nothing close to that. B, that Zach Wilson isn't just some spoiled brat punk, because that's the perception of him. It feels like
Right.
that
Right.
it's less about whether he played too soon or whether he can play at all. It's more about he just don't want it bad enough. He ain't working. He's not putting in the time. He's just he's a silver spoon type guy. And it seems like the Jets don't view him as beyond that they see him as salvageable, if not able to thrive under the right circumstances.
Here's the funny thing. He didn't have any
Not a
problems
lost
with his
cause.
teammates. No, I mean, look, go back to going into the 2022 season. He didn't have any problems with his teammates. There
Yeah.
were you didn't hear any riffs. You didn't hear like, oh, he's just a silver spoon guy and they can't get along. And none of that existed going into the season. Okay. It didn't.
Yeah.
It changed when he went out there and did not perform well. And then what I think compounded it and made it worse was he was defensive. He was someone that when he was questioned by the media, he reacted defensively.
Right.
And honestly, he said some things in his mind, and I truly believe this. I think after he made statements and then had a chance to step back and think about it, I think he was like, oh my God. Like,
and he owned it. He owned it behind the scenes.
And I do think that's true too. I think the intent of his words, especially about, do you think you let the defense down and that whole thing, I don't think the intent of his words were what and I think most people, when it went out of his mouth, I was just like, yeah, you let him down. Like you straight up should have been like, I let
Yeah.
everybody down.
Yeah.
I don't think in his mind he was. I don't want to explain it away. He said what he said. Okay, I don't want to. I
Right.
don't want to get into this.
But no, I get. But it was more about he was responding to the question. It was about. Somebody says, "Do you?" Again, I can give a whole interview in class on this, but if somebody says, "Do you feel like you let the team down?" That's a confirm or deny question, and there's some triggering components to that. If he doesn't agree with that sentiment, then trust me, I get it. I get exactly where you're coming from. This was about him versus the New York media, to your point, than it was him versus his teammates.
He handled it poorly. Okay, I will say that.
He did.
He absolutely handled it poorly. I think he understood later.
He didn't read the field well.
No, and he did not. And I think later he really regretted how that all went. And then I think at that point it became I think he felt like, okay, the world's against, like I'm toast here. Like I'm like there's like people. It feels like the fan base hates me. It feels like my teammates are upset with me, and that's I don't care who you are. It's a difficult place to be. You're sitting there, and then your thought process is like, "Fuck, how do I fix this? Like, how do I now try to apologize or make myself? I wish I could go back in time and take that back. I can't, and now I don't know how to fix this. And I think there's an element of maturity there that he has not yet learned. There's an element of you're not at BYU anymore when you step in front of those microphones. And those aren't college teammates. They're grown-ass men with families. This is a job. They are all fighting every single day, not for a scholarship or a start. They are fighting for livelihood, for legacy, for history, for their entire lives up until that point that delivered them to this point in the NFL. It is a whole different set of circumstances that you are commenting on. So I just think the Jets are like, look, he is not this lost cause everybody thinks he is. He needs time to step back and learn some things. We screwed up at the beginning with him. We should have handled it a little bit differently. So we share in this. Let's see if there's a way to get ourselves. And I'll say this. If they were to pull this off, if he becomes a viable piece in year 5, right, of his contract, sort of like for the Packers, if Jordan Love becomes a viable piece in 2023.
I definitely want to get to him,
You have accomplished something as a franchise that is a massive W. Okay?
You have a succession plan.
You got a succession plan. Exactly. Like this is now it was like the Roman Roy messiness.
Right.
Like, I mean, it was that bad. It was every bit of the Roy family in succession. But in the end of the day, if you pull it off and it works, no one's gonna care about the bull had to go through to get there.
No,
it's just did it work? It's like when Rodgers. Remember, it was messy between Aaron and Brett, but then once Aaron got out there, people were like, who cares? Like whatever, we got our guy. Like this is great.
And they didn't win immediately. So that brings me to Jordan Love. I do want to get because I'm glad the conversation went this way because like. We got plenty of time to do with the Jets as contenders. We got plenty of time to do, the hierarchy, the AFC now with Rodgers in it. I mean, he only has to be competent for the Jets to be contenders given what they had at quarterback. But the things that fascinated me the most were A, how it went down, B, the Zach Wilson of it all that you wrote about, but also you mentioned Jordan Love. I think I stood next to you.
You and I, our eyes met when Matt LaFleur said some of the stuff that he said. And you and I
at the owners' meeting in Phoenix.
Yes, right next to each other.
What did he say? More or less like, hey, like Jordan Love don't expect him to step in and be Aaron Rodgers. Like let's dial it back, because people think he's been like cooking in his oven, just ready to cook. The moment he hits the field. What is the book on Jordan Love inside the Packers organization?
That was the thing. Like you and I were standing there, and I remember looking at you right after he said, basically to paraphrase what Matt LaFleur was, what Matt LaFleur was saying about Jordan was, pull it back a little bit. Like we need to have some patience here. We need to have it was in his the way he was phrasing it was like he was like trying to throw cold water on this being, hey, this dude just steps in and expect the instant success. He was like, wait a minute. And you and I were sitting there, and I remember like just us raising eyebrows at each other, like, oh, okay. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is clearly a very dedicated attempt to walk back, this excitement or this idea that Jordan's just going to step in. And I think the reason for that is in terms of Jordan's progression inside that program. And I can tell you this from people who have left the team. I'm talking, and you can figure this out, coaches, players, whatever. When you talk to people about the Rodgers situation, you would always have to compare it to, well, what's going on with Jordan Love? And what you would hear
Mm-hmm.
about Jordan Love was he is not remotely ready to take this team over the first couple of years. It was like, there's no way he's ready to take this on. Um, you would see it in snapshots of his play, particularly that start against Kansas City early on. And it was, I think there was a thought process inside the Packers in the, like going into the 2021 season. Remember that off season where it was like, is Aaron going to be here? Or is he going to, I'm sorry, prior to the 2022 season, that off season prior to the 2022 season, it was like, are we trading Aaron to the Broncos? Is he going to be here? Is he going to sign a new deal? And I think at that time, this is coming out of the 2021 season, the thought process was, if Jordan is our starter in 2022, we might not win many games. Like, this might be a pretty, it's going to take some time, and we're going to go through some pretty significant growing pains with him at quarterback. I think in hindsight, Jordan Love had a lot of tools that he brought to the table. There were reasons why people were excited about him in terms of arm strength, athleticism, just a lot of the raw talent he brought to the table, but it was a more raw than I think people fully understood coming into the NFL game. And I think what happened during the course of the 2022 season, I can tell you, I don't know. Like, in terms of, is it real? I think Packers, if you talk to people internally at the Packers, there were some who felt optimistic about what they were seeing from Jordan in practices, in the limited looks he got in games against the Eagles. He had a little bit of a
Mm-hmm.
flourish when he went in. The media was not allowed to see him, day in and day out for the totality of practices to really see where he was at. But again, I think even that can be misleading anyway. You have to see them out playing in real games 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks in a row, 2 months in a row, 3 months in a row, when teams are
Right.
coming back the second time around, having film on you, knowing what you did terribly the first time, all these different things. So I think the Packers are hopeful. That's the word I would put on it with Jordan Love. They are hopeful that Jordan Love shows when he steps in 2023, he can make progress every single game out. He can show that upward trajectory. That's all about arrows. I remember one time I was sitting in Scott McLuhan's office when he was running the Washington franchise, and we were talking about Kirk
Mm-hmm.
Cousins. And
Mm-hmm.
Scott said to me, and this is when Kirk was his quarterback, Scott said to me, like, it's about arrows. Is the arrow flat like this? So where you're going to kind of stay the same? Is the arrow down, which is really bad? Or is the arrow up? If the arrow's up, you will do a lot of things to try and continue that upward trajectory. If it's flat, you're sort of like, we are what we are now. Can we build out enough around him to make the team good enough to be a Super Bowl type of contender? I think what
Yeah.
they need, what the Packers want to see about Jordan Love is the arrow going up? Is it a guy that
Yeah.
week in and week out is making strides and we can see the growth? If that's the case, then hey, they've got something to work with, and they're going to have to figure out, do you tag him, in 2024? And those are all wonderful quandaries to be in, because it means it worked.
Yeah.
Now, if it doesn't work, I can tell you this: I think there is a reason why they wanted that first round draft asset in 2024, because I think they are looking at the situation going, look, if this doesn't work with Jordan Love, say it's really bad, we will have our own first round asset, which likely would be fairly high in the draft if things
All
go
right. Might have
really
bottomed
badly.
out. Yeah.
Right, we might have bottomed out or close to it. And then if we have a second draft asset, we are going into a draft where at the bare minimum, there are going to be two quarterbacks that most personnel offices, if not all of them,
All right.
agree are
Caleb
franchise
Williams,
type
Drake
guys.
May. Yeah.
Caleb Williams out of USC, Drake May out of UNC. And as you and I know, there's always a third. There's always a quarterback we're not talking
Right.
about now. We're going to be
Right.
talking about next year. in next year's draft. And whoever that is will be someone that will likely surface over the course of the next college season or punch through in a way that NFL teams are really excited. So I think they want those assets just in case. It's the either we're using them to fix the quarterback spot and take our shot next year, or Jordan Love's worked out wonderfully, or we're in that upward trajectory. Now we can start to select the pieces to build around. This is our next guy, and we move this 10 years out.
Well, they got the second this year to add to talent around him. They moved up a couple of spots. It'll be interesting to see what they do in this year's draft. It'll also be interesting to see who makes the franchise or league-altering acquisition that we don't see coming, and we'll talk about that down the road. Man, I had every intention of going into the draft with you, but Rodgers just the trade went down, and you've been all over it. But like a couple of years ago, really started a couple of years ago with the drafting of Jordan Love. That set all this in motion, and here we are now. Charles Robinson, my main man, thank you, bro. It's so good to start this podcast off with you. If you're not already, you're missing out. Subscribe to UPod to win the game. Charles Robinson puts it down like this all the time. Follow my man. Read my main man. Love you, bro. Thanks so much for falling through.
I love you too, man. Let's make this a regular thing. Let's do this, all right?
Yeah. What you doing next week when the players are actually picked? Might be calling you next week.
Sounds good. Let's do it. Let's run it back.
All right, man. Later.
All right. Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks so much for kicking it with your main man, Michael Smith. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, but also subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Rate it, review it, tell your friends about it. Oh, and be sure to follow me on social media.